Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. My name is Guy Yedwab, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Explore Analytics. We're excited to have you all here to join us this morning. We'll be talking about smarter human resources delivery for Explore Analytics for ServiceNow. So this is a very exciting topic, and I'm really glad to be able to share it with you. The question that we often see is, how can we leverage reporting and analytics to drive excellent delivery? I've been working in the service delivery space for a long time, and I feel like sometimes we overlook some of the opportunities to use reporting and analytics to drive excellent delivery. So just a quick check to see if you're using reporting and analytics in all of these areas. The first area that I really see that reporting and analytics can drive excellent delivery is by leveraging dashboards, particularly real-time interactive dashboards, to focus on smart work. You want your staff to be able to focus on the most urgent cases or requests and be able to focus managers to see potential trouble situations. When you want to think about what makes excellent service delivery, what you're really trying to do is minimize those cases where you don't have the right amount of people or the right people focused on the job, and you want to be able to respond very quickly to situations as they arrive. And real-time interactive dashboards are a really great way to be able to focus on that. In parallel, and I think this is something that people are more traditionally thinking about with analytics, is stakeholder transparency. So whether it's folks within the HR organization or executives and key stakeholders who are outside the process, you want them to be able to know overall, how are we doing, what's going on right now, what's the current impact, so that you can also improve the perception of service delivery and be able to measure what are the improvements you've made over time. So this is something where people are often looking at from a long-term KPI trend perspective, but there's also a real-time component to that as well. And then lastly, you want to be able to use reporting and analytics for real deep analysis so that you can identify underlying trends and you can start to make very smart investments to tackle improvements, process automations, and really get to that continual service improvement. That's something that, again, both KPIs to understand trends, but also real-time reports where you can, on the fly, ask good questions and get very important information. So in today's presentation, we'll get to see a little bit of each of those and really get to see some of the rich capabilities that reporting and analytics can help drive. So as we're going along, ask yourself, how is our organization using reporting to drive smarter work, to give transparency to stakeholders, and to drive deep analysis? Now, one thing that's important to understand is that often when we come into reporting tools or analytics tools or visualization, dashboarding, a lot of these terms get thrown about, and sometimes you'll have two tools that address one or address another component but don't really look end to end. So for example, a KPI is something that measures the process. What's our average age of cases that are currently open, or what's our mean time to respond to folks who are out there? That's something that you might be looking at weekly or monthly or quarterly to measure the health of the process. On the other hand, a real dashboard report will drive the process to be improved. So whereas on the left, we're looking at a KPI of what's the age of those cases, on the right, we're looking at a dashboard looking for my team, what's the age of the cases that they're currently looking at, so that they can drill in and take action and actually resolve those cases. So on the left, we're able to measure the health of the process, and on the right, we're able to actually drive the process to completion. So you really need to be able to do both. So for example, this report at the bottom is looking at the calls that we've gotten today through our call system. What's the average number of calls we typically get hour by hour? And then how many calls have we seen today hour by hour? And in this case, we actually compare the two of them using Explore Analytics so that we can easily see, oh, at 6 a.m. we had a sudden burst of calls. Maybe there was something wrong with the benefit system, or maybe there's some change that was announced that led to a flurry of calls, something that's outside of the normal. So you can see that in this case, by bringing together both KPIs and real-time reports, we're actually able to drive a better understanding that will lead to better service delivery. So with today, everything that we're showing is using Explore Analytics. It's the easiest and most complete reporting tool, both for ServiceNow, and we also have the ability to reach to other sources of data as well. And we're going to run the gamut, everything from driving a report on the fly at the time that you need it to answer a very specific question through real-time dashboards that can drive resolutions, and then also KPIs and standard metrics that'll measure that health over time. So regardless of what mode of reporting or what's the objective, you want to be able to get it all from Explore Analytics in a very quick way. So just to talk about a couple case studies of where organizations have used this and why this has made an impact. One is a large global Fortune 50 company that had a service organization that was very centralized. But what they did was they rolled out a dashboard that was focused on stale tasks, so tasks that hadn't been actioned on for over a certain threshold of amount of time. By switching to a real-time dashboard that allowed people within the service organization to take action on those tasks immediately, they actually saw 30% improvement in the first 6 months. So a massive improvement in the service delivery, because they weren't just measuring how many stale tasks do we have, they were actually empowering the people who were working those cases to improve those in a quick way. So they got a better consistency globally. They had technicians that were working in a way that was aligned with the KPIs that they were measuring. Another great example was a cafe chain that used Explore Analytics because we can reach into these different sources of data to bring together not just ServiceNow, but their previous case management system, a call system, a chat system, all the different sources of engagement, so that they could actually get a holistic end-to-end measurement of service delivery. So that's one thing that with Explore Analytics is a big emphasis for us, is bringing together lots of different sources and lots of different data points together to get even more value out. And I'll show some examples as we get into the demonstration, which we're about to right now. But again, we want to focus on how are we helping people work smarter? How are we able to drive that better stakeholder transparency? And then how are we also able to really, improve some deep analysis? So I'll show a couple examples. Obviously, there's so much depth that we could get into to understand more of this, but we will be able to scratch the surface and hopefully bring together some interesting ideas. So right now I'm looking at Explore Analytics. This is an Explore Analytics dashboard embedded into ServiceNow's user interface. So for the people who are working day-to-day on cases, it's very seamless and transparent for them to be able to work with these reports. And these are all real-time. They're all very actionable reports. So I'm going to look at this from the perspective of a manager. And these reports are all filtered automatically based on the users that are within my department or my part of the organization, based on my logging in through ServiceNow. So I'm right now at this dashboard looking at things for my team. So I can very easily see, well, here are my cases by how long they've been open. So most of my team are working on things that have been opened within the last day, but I can see that there are a few tasks that are still open that have been open for up to a week. Now, as a manager, I could even decide to take action on that. Let me take a look at these, 10 cases that Stephen is working on and see if maybe I could reassign some of these and drive them to other people so that, we can very easily understand that. Or I can pop open one of these cases if in ServiceNow I have permission to see them and be able to provide direct assistance as a manager. So in that way, from the perspective of the HR organization, it's very easy for me to see the global view, see what's going on right now, drill through and actually take action. That ability to drill through and take action is key, because that's what's going to actually drive better performance on the long-term KPIs and goals that we have. So again, I'm able to do some aging. I'm able to see, and again, this is actually data that's not from ServiceNow, the call system data, so I can see what's going on from a call perspective and see that we've had some, recent incidents. And I can see more holistically for the folks on my team, what are they working on? So I can see that Roger seems to have bitten off quite a bit. He's got a lot of cases, but also some requests that have come through the service portal. He also has some coaching assessments that have been assigned to him. So again, as a manager, I might want to take action to move some of that work around and better balance it across the team if it's something that can be taken, that can be worked around. I can also take a look and see, well, what kinds of issues are getting overdue? And you can see, well, almost half of them are coming from the benefits, And if I want to understand more, I can actually drill down to a next level and see, okay, its benefits questions in general seems to be pretty evenly distributed, but that's what seems to be holding people up. Or I can also take a look and say, okay, well, let me see what departments have been driving that. Well, almost a third of it are salespeople asking benefits questions. So maybe having a targeted training around benefits for the sales department, maybe that'll help cut down some of these overdue cases as well. Again, we want to be able to see the information, drill through to the information to get more information, and be able to easily take action on it. We never want reports that are just there to show some pretty pictures. We want reports that actually drive action. So this has been pretty granular from a management perspective, but from a further up the chain perspective, we might want to see things more overall and over time. And this is where you get more into the KPIs. So this is a dashboard that's really just trying to look in at what's the volume of demand that's coming into HR. So I'm looking across a number of different processes, how many calls are coming in through our call system in ServiceNow, how many cases and how many requests are being logged, how many coaching assessments are we doing, whatever those processes are that are part of this, and you could break it down, into categories if you want to, but it's very easy for me to see how this rolls over time. I can drag my way to see more information in this timeline. If I have a manager who would prefer to see it as a bar with breakdowns, they can do that for themselves. They don't need to have me build a different report, right? So that you can use the same report in lots of different ways and be able to slice and move through it easily. Same with layering multiple levels of information. This is how many tasks and cases and requests were opened, how many were closed, and what's the backlog as that moves month by month. So I can, again, see everything in one place. But I also want to say that as you refine these and as you build into looking at these trends, because Explore Analytics allows you to very easily build calculations and do, pull pieces of information together, the more information you bring together, the smarter those analytics can be. So what I often see is a lot of organizations start with demand like this, where you're seeing how many tasks were opened, and then actually move to something that's a little bit more refined. So this dashboard is looking at very similar information, but it's actually divided by the number of employees. The reason for that in this case is, sometimes there might be a lot of turnover. Maybe we've acquired another company or added a significant amount of headcount or moved that headcount. So maybe the higher caseload is actually just because we have more people making requests. So in this case, we're taking all of those numbers from before and dividing it by the number of employees, which might be in ServiceNow. It might be something we pull from our HR system of record to be able to do that. And so now we're actually looking at it more proportionally. So we can see, are there underlying trends there? So we've touched on just a few quick examples of how you can leverage this, bringing together both the real-time and the KPIs. But I just wanted to let you know that what I've seen with organizations is that once they get a hold of this Explore Analytics tool, they often start to build a lot more specific questions. So this is an example that I worked on with a customer that was using Explore Analytics in context of ServiceNow, but also with an application around training. So just as a quick example of some of the granularity you can get into, they were looking at, for our employees, based on how long they've been with the organization, bucketed into less than 2 years, 2 to 5 years, and 5+ years, how much are they actually taking on? How many tasks are they able to do? So you can get at some productivity numbers for the folks who are working cases. And what they found was, which is similar to what's reflected in the report, was that employees who'd been around between 2 and 5 years were often some of the most productive. So they could look at, what can we do to ramp up newer employees quicker? What can we do to keep longer-term employees engaged? But, it started as a question. Someone wanted to be able to do that. And it involved using an Explore Analytics feature called the mashup, where they're combining information from multiple tables across ServiceNow into one report, and involve being able to do a calculation, so dividing the ratio of cases to technicians. You'll notice that when it comes to things like these calculations, we're approaching it in a very user-oriented, Excel-like formula perspective, because none of these reports we've shown, whether it involves multiple sources of data, whether it involves combining or calculations. None of them require any further skill set than you would need to build a similar report in Excel, and all the data is real-time and directly against the ServiceNow data. So it allows you to ask those kinds of ad hoc questions like this one, or like another one that the same organization was looking at, which is, what's that productivity in terms of cases that were handled by people who had been trained by specific trainers or using specific curriculum over the time. So this is saying in the first month since they were hired, how many cases were they able to handle? In the second month since they were hired, how many cases were they able to handle? And the third month. So the goal with Explore Analytics is to be able to allow you to ask any of these questions and be able to get a lot of transparency, whether it's around those core HR processes or whether it's around something like HR project management. Whatever you're using ServiceNow for, you can really open your mind to tackling a lot of different questions into a lot of different areas. Now I'll pause for a moment. I've shown a lot of different examples. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask at this time, you can use the chat feature of the webinar, and feel free to ask any questions you'd like. Great. So the question is to how easy is it to actually build these reports? So one of the real goals is to really make this a point-and-click user interface. So for example, if I'm selecting, I want to make something on the case table, and I want to do this as a pivot, my first case report, you're really going to be just dragging and dropping to get this information together. So for example, if I want to say, give it to me by category, I just drag that in there. If I say, okay, which company, I drag that into the company columns. You know, it's really just dragging and dropping to be able to get these multi-level reports on demand. Any other questions? Great, so a question was asked about being able to try this product for yourself. If you go to myexploreanalytics.com/registration, you can find this through our website. You can sign up for a free 30-day trial, and you can try this against ServiceNow. You can try this against other data sources, and you can very easily try this against your own data or against a sandbox instance that you have. And there's a question about how do you place this this content into the ServiceNow user interface? It's a great question. So if I go to Explore Analytics and I grab, let's say this service level agreement, with all of the Explore Analytics content, whether it's individual reports or a dashboard, if I go to the File menu and I select Publish, I can select Publish to ServiceNow. I can even select if I have multiple. And what that is going to do as I walk through that publishing process is it'll automatically create an iframe content block that you can put in the ServiceNow user interface, whether it's on the ServiceNow dashboards, or you can also put it in the content portal. You also have a URL that you can send directly to someone, and you also get an embed code. So if you had, for instance, a SharePoint or a Google site that's being used by non-ServiceNow users, you can also present that information to them as well. So the Explore Analytics dashboards can be a full standalone place to send them. In this case, for this example, I also just embedded this as a module in the left-hand side so that when I select one of these dashboards, it opens up the Explore Analytics dashboard full screen within the ServiceNow user interface. So again, just makes it very easy to make it seamless and place it wherever you want to share that. Any other questions? Great, so there's a question on how Explore Analytics interfaces with ServiceNow. So the way that Explore Analytics interfaces with ServiceNow is using a real-time connection. So Explore Analytics, the integration that we have with ServiceNow is a update set that you apply to ServiceNow. If you're familiar with update sets, it's kind of a prepackaged integration. And when you load a report in Explore Analytics, it runs a query to ServiceNow, gathers that information, and then displays that to the user in the browser. So the data remains within ServiceNow. We are not building a data warehouse or copying the data, and it's able to be displayed to the user. One advantage of that is that all of the data still has all of the great, all the ways that ServiceNow data connects to each other and things like display values. It all works natively. Another big advantage of it is that we actually apply ServiceNow security to the queries. So if I'm a HR manager for a particular region and I open up one of these reports, I'm not going to see anything in the report that I don't already have access to in ServiceNow. It's a huge, huge advantage from a security and a contextual capability because we're querying to ServiceNow. While we have this up as well, I mentioned that we can connect to other sources of data. So for example, if you have a Oracle database that is running a call system, or if you have another source of data, we can run real-time queries to those as well through something we call the Explore Analytics agent. I see another question about configuring limitations to the data. When we're querying real-time, both on the ServiceNow side and on the Explore Analytics side, there's limits on how many concurrent queries that we run. So, for example, if 1,000 people opened up 1,000 dashboards simultaneously, we wouldn't run 1,000 simultaneous queries. Instead, we would queue them and respond to them in the order in which those queries were received. When it comes to querying those data, we're not pulling out the individual rows of data. So, for example, if you run a incidents by month for the last 5 years, we're not pulling out the individual rows. So, for example, if you use Tableau or a similar business intelligence tools, typically that's going to be pulling individual records. So if you have 1 million records, it actually has to pull 1 million lines of data out of ServiceNow. Instead, we actually hand off that query to ServiceNow, and ServiceNow is only sending us the aggregated version of that query. So I'd be happy to follow up to go even deeper into that as well. But one thing I'll point out, I mentioned some of our customer case studies. We have a Fortune 50 beverage company. They have over 1,000 users worldwide that are all using the real-time dashboards, and they're not seeing performance issues on ServiceNow or elsewhere. So I'd be happy to go further into this with the folks who are asking that question. But I assure you that we are aware of the pain points of other approaches, and we've really worked hard to make that very easy. Thank you all for your time today. I'm happy to follow up via email or set up follow-up calls with folks who want to go deeper into these topics. As we've mentioned, if you go to Explore Analytics' website, you can find our 30-day free trial to try this against your own sandbox environment. But we'd be very happy to see you, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to help you solve your HR problems today.